Hallo und herzlich willkommen zurück zu einer weiteren Folge Witch on the Holy Night. Soujyuro ist ja jetzt in einem alten Schulgebäude aufgetaucht, wo Aoko und Alice schon von Toko und Beo besiegt wurden. Und Beo ist jetzt ziemlich angepisst, dass Soujyuro ihn erstens komplett ignoriert hat, zweitens offenbar keine Angst vor ihm hatte, dem allmächtigen Beowulf, und drittens ihn auch noch gesagt hat, dass irgendwas nach Hund stinkt und damit wahrscheinlich Beo meint. Der dürfte davon nicht so sonderlich happy sein. Mal sehen, was daraus jetzt wird. Also ich könnte mir tatsächlich vorstellen, dass Soujyuro irgendwie aus irgendeinem Grund quasi der perfekte Konter für so ein Wesen wie Beo ist. Oder Soujyuro geht halt drauf und Aoko läuft dann irgendwie Amok oder sowas. Kann ich mir auch gut vorstellen. In a moment, the wind picked up, perhaps signaling a change in the werewolf's mood. A fiery gale wiped around, carving patterns in the snow.
Soujyuro!
Sensing he was about to be killed, Aoko desperately tried to move, but her broken body would not respond. After he saw Soujyuro's inside, Alice was unsuccessfully struggling to get to her feet too. In complete contrast, Soujyuro stood there, firmly and unfazed. The little blonde boy's well of patience had run dry.
そうか。要するに僕が子供だからって舐めてるんだね。お兄さんは。
He is absolutely pissed. His time playing human was over. Enraged, the boy transformed. He grew larger and larger, golden fur sprouting from his pale flesh. His mouth grew razor-sharp fangs, his hands grew claws. Drawing from the magical energy in the air, he transformed into a preternatural beast, a wolf in the shape of a human. Toko yelled at him, but the werewolf did not respond. He only huffed deep breaths of hot air. That was all Soujyuro could say in response to the boy's metamorphosis. Such a transformation was the stuff of nightmares. What was worse, the beast now towered above him. It was enough to make anybody question reality itself. And seeing his prey's reaction satisfied the werewolf, and his mouth twisted into a satisfied grin. He was a strange one, this guy, but meat was meat. However, the beast's arrogance was short-lived. The prey breathed a sigh of exasperation before speaking. You could hear a pin drop even in the snow. Aoko, Alice and Toko were all dumbfounded. Were they really seeing a human, not just a werewolf down, but insult it to its face? They simply could not believe it. Ich kann mir vorstellen, dass gerade das Soujyuro so mächtig gegenüber Beo macht. Weil Beo könnte seine Kraft daraus ziehen, dass er halt sozusagen wie erklärt man es am besten? Dadurch, dass Soujyuro sich nicht irgendwie schwächer fühlt als Beo, könnte Beo tatsächlich schwächer sein als Soujyuro. So. Das ist irgendwie mies blöd zu erklären. It was too late. Any trace of the wolf's pride or dignity faded away. The onlookers finally realized that the wolf was serious. But Toko's command fell on deaf ears. The wolf prepared to lunge, his emerald eyes fixed on Soujyuro, not 30 feet in front of him. A mere 30 feet. A high second was all he needed. Another second to bring his claws down and slice his prey from head to toe. A roar of joyous, unbridled fury echoed far and wide. It was the only warning the werewolf gave as he exploded towards Soujyuro. Also man muss dabei immer noch bedenken, Soujyuro hat ja hier irgendwelche Narben. Und irgendwas ist um seinen Hals rum. Das wurde bisher immer noch nicht aufgeklärt, was es damit auf sich hat. Und irgendwann muss es ja eigentlich mal geklärt werden. Möchte ich einfach mal kurz so anmerken. Vor allem, weil wir gerade mitten im Finale sind, wahrscheinlich. 1 second. A golden blur swept forth in a furious gust, too fast for the eyes to follow. In the face of unworldly speed there was only one thing to do. Soujyuro stepped forward, a silent shadow opposite the beastly silhouette of the incoming werewolf. He needed exactly 3 paces. He bet his entire life on around 3 feet of distance. In the blink of an eye death would be upon him. Yet he did not show the slightest indication intended to avoid the lunging behemoth. The werewolf's forelegs slammed into the ground with earth-shaking fury. His back muscles tensed up so much they seemed barely contained in the same as he swept a raised paw downward. With a small step neatly avoided the claws, but he had a different motive. He was merely positioning himself for the next move. His intention was never to avoid anything. From the beginning, his mind was focused on but one thing. 1 point to aim for. 1 mind. 1 breath. He picked the perfect opening in the wolf's torso, the precise microsecond between contraction and relaxation. That 1 point alone was a crack in the dam of life. Oh, wie geil. Tatsächlich sowas. He punched the werewolf in the chest with his feeble human strength. There was a dull thud and a burst of blood. The twisted flesh and gore were all Soujyuro on. The werewolf raised claw convulsed. From an insignificant impact, the beast's body was the first to collapse, then his spirit. There was a moment of utter incomprehension. The wolf opened his jaw to try and pull air into his lungs. Gasping, he began to topple forward. Soujyuro hat mit einem Schlag sein Herz sozusagen zum Stehen gebracht. The slender figure slipped around his flank. The next blow pierced him like a spear. Ignoring his mangled left arm, the silhouette whirled around and drove his right elbow into the collapsing werewolf's back. There was another muffled impact. The second strike penetrated the exact same spot the first strike had, crushing the beast's heart. This time, the blood that flew into the air belonged to the gasping werewolf. Oh, wie geil. Okay, das sieht schon übel aus. The werewolf fell to the ground, choking on his own blood. He did not get up. He showed no sign of life. Okay, das ist sick. It was over. There was no remorse, no hesitation in that brief act of violence. The perfect, furious, golden beast lay still. Felled in a mere 3 seconds. Ey, der Junge kommt halt aus den Bergen. Wer weiß, was der da alles durchgemacht hat. No sane person would have bet on this outcome. His breathing calm, the victor stood over the fallen behemoth's body. Even as the beast lay crumpled in the snow, he could not grasp what had happened. His heart had ruptured, cutting the blood flow to his body and brain, leaving him helpless. That much he knew. If he were a normal creature, he would be dead. As it was, this was a trifling inconvenience. Once his heart was repaired, his body would heal as well. It was not as if he had been struck by magecraft exceeding his own mystical nature. This was little different than a grazed knee. Which is what was so strange. Your heart does not stop from a grazed knee. The werewolf frantically searched his memory. He managed to remember right up until the moment he raised his claws, but what had come after that? Given the right transformation, he knew he could withstand even a cannon blast. How had a punny human dropped him? Wait, before that he had to figure out exactly what his opponent did to him. The moment he got in close, yes, he had felt a small impact. The attack was so accurate that it probably only affected his heart. Ridiculous. Even if that was possible, there was no way that alone could stop a werewolf's heart. In the end, no matter how much he thought about it, nothing added up. His answer was out of reach for a werewolf with no knowledge of being backed into a corner, let alone the limits of human skill. Only one thing was certain, he had lost. He tried to piece together the sequence of events. The explosion in his chest, the flash of white. After that, as he was falling over, he took another blow to his back. That was the one that disrupted his heart. Could lose? Indeed. It was physically impossible. The boy gnashed by his teeth and tensed his body in indignation at this unfair conclusion. Sorry, dass hier es nicht Chaos hat. Man kann nicht einfach die Realität umändern. Cherish dein Papier. Enough thinking. He was ready. From the ground he glared at his enemy to his side. The very next moment, an unknown type of pain coursed down his spine. It had eyes, cold eyes, staring, piercing, colorless. The moon looked more alive. Its arms were broken. Its inhumanly powerful attack had mangled them beyond recognition. If it was in pain, it would have cried out. But it was silent. Was it ever alive? Those dead eyes. He had seen eyes like those before. Those eyes without hatred, without joy. Without any feeling behind them at all. It was a mindless insect. The werewolf's hair stood on end. What was this creeping chill crawling up his spine? Having never experienced fear, the werewolf did not know what had become of him. Despite countless clashes against other mystiques, it had been a human that broke him. He knew beasts even larger than himself. He knew legendary creatures like himself. He did not know this. He had never met, much less imagined, a human-sized bug. The chill down the werewolf's spine was so vicious, it threatened to split him in two. If he moved even an inch, it would crush his skull underfoot. In spite of the despair gripping him, the boy paradoxically sensed that his opponent would not move at all. This human would exhibit no further violence. It was a creature, no, a stone that had no animal instincts. It masqueraded as a human. Okay, das erinnert mich wiederum an einen gewissen Anime, den ich nicht komplett, aber den ich teilweise gesehen habe, von einem Stein, der Gestalt wandelt. Und dann nennen wir es einfach mal Erinnerungen hin aufsaugt. The contradiction grated against his heart, his values. A phantom pain born of an unknown emotion, fear. It wasn't just grating, it was like many needles slowly digging into his heart. This had been his first taste of doubt of reality. Such contradictions existed in the world after all. They were irrationalities and questions you did not want to hear the answers to. The suppressed pain suddenly flowed through his body like a raging river. This was also a first. Until now he had always been able to control pain. He had never known what it was like to tremble. An elemental might have even felt sorry for him, if it were here to watch. How sad, born complete, yet lost in the lunacy of the human world. His heart had fully regenerated. Howling in mental agony, the beast clutched his own trembling body. Those eyes, those human eyes looking straight through him. And then the boy realized the only reason he was still alive. Even with both arms broken, the human could have finished him off with its legs. But it mattered not, because his opponent was giving him a taste of his own medicine. This was not revenge for trying to kill him. This was revenge for the wounds he inflicted on the girls. The absurdity of it all made his throat tighten. His breathing was frantic. This human had no sense of self. It had no concern for its own safety when it stood between him and the girls. That must be why it had no hate or fear, or perhaps even intent to kill him. Indeed, the fact that he was alive had nothing to do with the human's will. The fight was machine-like, so was its judgment. An eye for an eye, and nothing more. If the werewolf had killed one of the girls, this exchange would have ended differently. Alter, das ist mal absolut psychologische Kriegsführung gerade. He shuddered at the thought. He had never entertained such a possibility. He had never had to, because he was supposed to be the one exception to that rule. Agony kicked him hard in the gut. No matter the mystique, nothing was immune from injury, from decay. The boy finally understood an obvious law of the world. Or rather, he had been taught. Those eyes, they would not stop staring down at him. Retribution was a universal law. He was now painfully aware of that fact. And yet, the one who brought from to this idea was this human. The pain of defeat, the pain of his heart, the pain of comprehending the incomprehensible. Pain. The impossibility of it all had shattered his perfect world. It ate at him, consumed every fiber of his being. The doubt made his head spin. It was too much. Humans were impossible to understand. He had not been made to face the death of another, but his own. Unable to cope, he reverted to his human form. Quietly, he shivered like a frightened child in my mother's lap. Still lying in the snow, Aoko choked on her words, unable to entirely comprehend what had unfolded.
Soujyuro, anta.
She could not hide the trembling in her voice.
Nani?
Speaking in his usual way, Soujyuro nonchalantly turned toward it. She shouted angrily as though he had done something wrong. Soujyuro looked surprised, wondering what on earth he had done to upset her. He lowered his gaze back to the wolf boy. Knitting his brow in dismay, Soujyuro finally realized what Aoko was referring to. He looked at her in disappointment. Feeling slightly affronted, Aoko responded curtly. Soujyuro sighed.
山じゃ熊はそう珍しいものじゃない。以前確かに言ったじゃないか。
Ako's jaw dropped. It took her a moment to process what he had just said. She recalled some meaningless conversation or other from who knows when.
君、もしかして俺をバカにしているのか？まったく。なんで熊を倒すためなんかに修行しなくちゃいけないんだ。
Oh, wie herrlich. Yes, now she thought about it. they had spoken about that. He had mentioned being familiar with large beasts. And she couldn't deny that she had heard him utter some anachronistic nonsense about training against them. Which meant he was used to dealing with animals larger than himself. If he had lived the sort of life that involved run-ins with wild bears, then a man-wolf might only have been surprising, but not particularly frightening. Aoko hung her head. After all this time, who was it that really made no sense? It was hard to tell whether she spoke in admiration or exasperation. Either way, as she slouched in the snow, Oko quietly enough so only she could hear her. Oko spoke quietly enough so only she could hear her words. Toko, on the other hand, understood exactly what had transpired. Bio lay fallen, now just a sobbing boy, and another boy stood over him with 2 shattered arms. Near fatally wounded, Oko and Alice still could not stand, but had recovered enough to breathe. As for Toko, she had only a few tricks up her sleeve, maybe 3 or 4 more wounds at best. The magic crest on her back were unusable. She could use the remaining magic energy from the field imprisoning her grandfather, but that would be stupid. If she released her grandfather, she would lose ownership of the sacred ground. Failing to defeat Aoko and Alice now would mean starting over from square one, and she could not afford it. The sibling rivalry had to end. Toko had gambled everything on a surprise attack. Using the fact she was still in Aozaki to infiltrate Misaki's defense. For 3 years she had labored, selling her work to the association. And she had used 20 years worth of hair to mobilize an army of familiars. It was now or never. She had overestimated the werewolf's power. It should have been enough. Against mages alone, Beowulf by himself would have been enough to ensure complete victory. But things did not always go according to plan. Beowulf's incredible strength was conditional. She knew he was not infallible, so why hadn't she prepared a contingency plan? Her heart as cold as ice, Toko stared at Soujyuro, who stood tall. His arms were a hideous mess. The arm he used to strike Beowulf head on barely even resembled an arm. His bones were bent out of shape. His muscles were torn to shreds. To say his arm was simply broken would be a gross understatement. Streams of crimson ran down his other arm onto the white snow. The elbow he drew into Beowulf's back was likely shattered, and his muscle and tendons torn up to his shoulder. Judging from the state of his arm, it was doubtful he would be able to use them again. Worse than his arms were his left leg, and no doubt his internal organs too. He had used the leg to take the full brunt of Beowulf's charge. At a glance it looked fine, but it was now just a useless hunk of meat attached to his torso. His insides were worse. Supporting the weight of Beowulf had a rupture in his spine, causing widespread internal bleeding. Basically he was a dead man standing, a bird with clipped wings. Living like that would not be living at all. He could barely stand, let alone fight again. In contrast, the collapsed Earth was unscathed. Only once had he coughed up blood. The majority of the pool of red on the snow was Soujyuro's, a crimson tapestry telling the story of the boy who stood strong and defeated a werewolf.
当然だ。衝撃には反動が伴う。拳を振るうのなら相応の負担がある。まして相手は人狼。走ってくる鉄の壁を真っ向から殴るようなものだ。それを。
Perhaps he had known what would happen. Animals instinctively limit their strength in order to protect their body. Compensating for physical weakness with intellect and technique was humanity's forte, and that clash had shown humans at their very best, and yet it had also been beyond human. He had attacked without concern for his own safety, without self-preservation in mind. He could go beyond human capability, enough to strike, enough to steal through the steel-like fur of a legendary werewolf. But who would have thought that a beast able to withstand a shot from a tank would be felled by a mere human? Das ist jetzt grünlicher geworden, weniger gelb. Sorry, weniger gelb-golden, sondern mehr grün.
ためらうことなく殴りつけたから壊れたのではない。初めからあれは壊すことを前提にしていたな。
He sacrificed his entire body to destroy Beowulf's heart. Toko felt a chill come over her as she went over in her head what had transpired. It should have been a nightmarish scene, but she was captivated by that supreme display of physical rationality. From the outside looking in, she had witnessed not an accident, but a rational consequence. In that instant, the boy had put his entire being into piercing Beo's chest. As soon as he laid eyes on Aoko and Alice, he had committed himself fully to the task. He sized Beo up, synchronized his breathing, found his weak point and calculated the exact positioning, timing and distance. He would need to hold his ground. He knew what he had to do to win, and did it with everything he had. It had nothing to do with instinct. A wild creature would not have tried to beat something it could not. Only a human would risk his life when faced with the impossible. That contradiction fed his attack. He twisted his body from his heel to his neck to focus his energy. If Beo had simply tried to run Soujyuro down, the werewolf would probably have won. But the beast wanted to rip him to shreds, or rather, he was baited into doing so. After Beo charged, when he planted his feet, he raised his claw, then swung it downward, putting himself off balance. His pulse was erratic, his movement wild. In that moment, he was vulnerable. That was when Soujyuro made his move. The beast had overwhelming power, but it was sloppy. Whereas the human concentrated all of his meager power into a single point. That was how the human shifted the balance in his favor. The follow-up attack would rupture Beo's heart. It was a graceless second strike. A sloppy blow, no different from Beo's. The arrow was only able to penetrate the beast's golden fur because of the first attack to its chest.
あの時点でベオは丸裸にされていた。無敵の人狼がその機能の一切を休止させられた。つまり
The strike was not meant to break, but to disable. All living creatures had weaknesses. No matter how strong the creature, it had weak points and weak moments. Not just physically, but mentally too. A time when they aren't in their best shape, unable to focus or find motivation. Sickness or lack of sleep or food, for example, can cause the body's rhythm to go out of sync. For a variety of reasons, intelligent beings risk losing their ability to function properly. Legendary beasts were no exception.
弱点、欠点をつく魔術なら知っているが、すべてを投げ打って弱点を生むとはな。
The boy's strike to the heart was not an attempt to kill Beo. It was designed to create a weakness in something that had none. The able attack took advantage of that break in Beo's invulnerability.
加えて、笑えることに不意打ちですらない。ベオの神経の伝達速度なら、毒が当たった瞬間に感知し対応できる。だが、そもそもそれを毒と認識できなければ、変形のしようもない。毒ではないものが毒になるなんて落とし穴を、誰が教えてやれるものか。
She was frustrated, to say the least. The boy was totally committed, utterly selfless. He bet his life on that single moment without expecting a single thing in return. That boy had acquired the experience and skill to do such a thing. It was not a miracle of luck, nor a miracle of passion. It was not talent, tenacity, or hatred. Without constant, intense training, no one could destroy their own body on a whim like that.
子供には相手が悪かったようね。
Seeing Beo cowering in the snow, Toko was disappointed in her own lack of foresight. She had used him for his talent alone, ignoring his inexperience. If Beo was not a child, his life experience might have given him the strength to bounce back and devour Soujyuro after regenerating.
ベオを責めるべきか、それとも君を評価すべきなのか。
Toko quietly lifted her left hand. Nobody noticed. Standing far away, the boy standing there looked like a hunter from a picture book. He had a slender build, but that was likely because he intentionally shed any excess. Given what she just witnessed, his cluelessness had to be part of an act. The act of a hunter. As she thought to herself, she suddenly remembered. The first thing that crossed her mind the first time they spoke.
そうだったな。だが、それは忘れていたかったよ、宗十郎君。
No sooner had she felt a sliver of sentiment, she returned to her unshakable resolve. She was raised as an heir to the Aosaki house, taught never to question the morality of her actions. That was why even now, she knew exactly what she had to do. Und ich würde sagen, an dem Punkt beende ich dann diese Folge. Also, geil. Aber irgendwie habe ich so das Gefühl, dass Soujyuro potenziell jetzt draufgehen könnte. Vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen und bis zum nächsten Mal. Ciao.